No, I think it's wrong to suggest that I am responsible for all of the things that went wrong in my premiership because I am Liz Truss and I really don't have a sense of self so that I can be responsible for things. And that's why I speaks in this bizarre accent, which in some ways sounds a bit like I comes from the West Country. Hello, 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 and welcome to this edition of The Jolly Heretic. Now, today I would like to talk about Liz Truss, and specifically her new book, 10 Years to Save the West. I've done videos before on the autism of Liz Truss, but this book only goes to confirm it in more detail. And I would like to suggest not only does she have autism, she has aspects of what's called borderline personality, which crosses over with autism. And I think this explains a great deal about her. Before I do that, could you please subscribe? It helps me violently if you do that. Could you subscribe here? And could you also subscribe on my Substack, which is jollyheretic.com, where I have all of the spiciest content, all in-person interviews, vlogs, and all the stuff that I don't dare put here on YouTube. And where if you like what I do, you can support me for as little as the cost of a pint of beer a month. Now, back to Liz Truss, back to the video. So, Liz Truss. I want to go through two things. I want to go through the evidence of her autism, and I want to go through then how this book provides further evidence of it. Or I want to go through rather new evidence of her autism that I haven't looked at before. Now, first of all, physical appearance. What is autism? Autism is characterised by a poor theory of mind, by being the opposite of that, by being very, very high in systematising, and it is also characterised by having basically no filter when it comes to sensations. So by feeling sensations extremely strongly. Now, what this means then is that the world is this swirling, intense chaos for you, and you desperately want to make sense of it. This can lead to obsessions and special interests, which autists often have. You will feel stimulation, noises, whatever, sensations extremely strongly, including the sensations of your own body. Because of all this, and because you will desperately desire structure and order, you will hate change. But you will also feel emotions incredibly intensely, because remember, a big part of what an emotion is your body's physical reaction to something. And you will feel these incredibly strongly. Very strong emotions, very strong positive emotions, happiness and so forth, but also very strong negative emotions, fear and all this sort of thing. Consequently, you will very easily develop trauma, and you will intensely fear things that normal people fear a little bit, such as abandonment and whatever. Now, what this results in is a weak sense of self, which is the other characteristic of autism. What is a sense of self? A sense of self is that you have a clear sense of who you are in the world. You're able to make it as you grow up, as you grow older. You have no sense of self when you're younger. You're just oscillating between different extreme emotions, and you're not really self-aware. Think about the idea of this: that when you are daydreaming, for example, or when you are really angry, or when you are really happy, you lose self-awareness. You sort of merge into the platonic whole. Well, imagine that happening to you frequently. That's what's going to be the case with people that are autistic. They lose self-awareness, and there's extremes of emotion as well. So whereas with normal people, their emotions operate within sort of certain boundaries, so that they're broadly a happy person or broadly an unhappy person. With these people, there will be extremes of emotion. So there is no clear, in that sense of who they are across time. They don't develop a clear sense of who they are in the world. Normal people will develop a series of an emotional repertoire where there is a kind of a conductor of the orchestra of their emotions that sort of controls things, and they will move between different sort of emotional states, and they'll have some awareness that they're doing so. With people that are highly emotional, which autism can be associated with, that is not the case. They're also constantly self-doubting, but I'll move to that in a minute. So that means they're not stable. They'll swing in extreme ways and not really be aware of so doing. And so they can come across as like emotionally unstable across time, almost as a different sense of selves, different selves almost across time, and they'll only be dimly aware that this change is happening. In the most extreme case, of course, when that happens, when you become emotionally completely unhinged, you can develop a psychotic state where you become utterly paranoid about the world around you, a sort of psychosis, or a schizoid state where you completely withdraw, and you're only only dimly aware that you're doing so. It seems quite normal to you. You might have like a sense of gnosis that suddenly you have the truth, and then you'll calm down and you'll realise that everything's okay. So they're not stable across time. It's like children. And the other thing they'll engage in, because the emotions are so intense and they can't cope with them, is dissociation. And this is where you will almost you can almost take on a different self, almost unconsciously or consciously take on a different self in order to calm yourself down in the situation, i.e. like become a child, or to deal with somebody else. Now, this is the essence of borderline personality disorder, fundamental fear of abandonment. And among women, it crosses over very strongly with being autistic. Autistics and people with borderline personality disorder have the same kind of thing: identity disturbance, unstable relationships, impulsivity, emotional liability, problems controlling anger, and acting out. And you can also see how among borderline autism can result in borderline personality disorder, i.e. the trauma resulting in the fear of abandonment. Because if you're autistic, you'll be bullied, and you'll experience the world very intensely, and you'll get traumatized very easily, and that sort of thing. So there's this crossover between the two. This is important to bear in mind. Now, in understanding this, it should be understood that the heritability of autism and of borderline personality disorder is at least 0.5, i.e. the genetic component. And some people have argued that the genetic component is as high as 0.8. And in that Liz Truss's father was a professor of mathematics, and being excellent at mathematics is systematising its associated with autism, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're dealing with the genetic issue here. Now, because this is something that happens very early in development, there is a physical look that is associated with autism. Neurocrest cells, which flood the fetus at a very early stage, do so in a different way among autistics, resulting in autistics looking physically different. Certain markers are different from normal people, and indeed it has been suggested that autistics are basically more wild. We are evolved. If you are domesticated, then you have high theory of mind. You are good at cooperating with people. You're good at understanding people. You don't have strong emotions. That's what being domesticated is. And if you're not domesticated, if you're wild, then you'll be the opposite of that. I.e., in some ways, you'll be more like you're autistic. In some ways, and it's been suggested if you look at animals that are domesticated versus those that are wild, there are certain noticeable differences, and you see the same kinds of differences if you compare autistics to non-autistics. Autistics will have bigger heads on average, they will have larger foreheads, they will have longer noses. You will also see, as is true when comparing wild and domesticated dogs, but you will also see certain subtle morphological features that are there because something has gone wrong in development. Autistics will have unusual shaped ears. Now, you don't see Liz Truss's ears very often, but if you look at them, when you occasionally glance at them, they are slightly oddly shaped. And their ears will be low set. And you can see this with Liz Truss's ears. She has low set ears. Autistics will have narrow lips. Now, one of the things that's very, very noticeable about Liz Truss is that she has extremely narrow lips. Autistics will have other odd facial morphologies. You will also see with Liz Truss that she has this peculiar twisted nose. Autistics are more likely to have inverted digits. So normal people's toes or fingers are like that if you see them straight on. Autistics are more likely to be inverted like that. So almost like, imagine the toe or the finger almost triangular. You see what I mean? Well, that is more common among autistics. So she definitely has the physical look of an autistic. Now, in terms of her behaviour patterns and this crossover with borderline personality disorder, remember that people that are high in borderline personality disorder have a fundamental fear of abandonment, and therefore what you have with borderline personality disorder women is they feel this emotional chaos, and they are looking for a man to rescue them. They are looking for a man who could help them. They are looking for a man who they can get out of their situation with. And so they will be attracted to often is men that are of very high status because they see this man as their rescuer. Men who are much older than them because they see this man as their sort of father figure. figure who will look after them. And then they will kind of because of the emotions being so strong, they will engage in idealization. They will idealize that man as their absolute savior. They will see him as absolutely wonderful and amazing. And remember also, they're deeply, deeply insecure, and deeply, deeply fear abandonment, and therefore very much want to feel desirable and whatever, and are highly attracted to these very high status, father-like, much older men who they see as their potential rescuers. And so you can see how they would be inclined to have affairs. And that is true with Liz Truss. What you have with Liz Truss is she marries this man, Hugh O'Leary, who I assume is the stable, kind, lovely man that gives her a sort of rock on which she can cope and regulates her emotions and so forth. But at the same time, because she's constantly self-doubting, because she's constantly wondering who she is, because she's constantly worrying and concerned and just doesn't feel anything's quite right, there is this attraction to something more dominant, particularly when you consider once she becomes more economically successful than her husband, she's going to be attracted to something more dominant, the father figure, the man that can look after her, the much older man, the more dominant man, the taller man, perhaps, the more dominant man. And that's what she sees in this guy, Mark Field, who... Just a quick interruption. Please stop for a second and ask yourself this. Is there someone you could easily share this video with? Someone you know will agree because their moral values align with what I'm saying? Well, you should definitely go ahead and do so then. On the other hand, can you think of someone who would definitely not agree? Who would just be angry that you would share such a nasty, racist, mean, evil video with them? Most likely you know both types of people, and the reason why these two people would react so differently to this video is because of their moral foundations. According to the moral foundation theory, conservative values rest on 5 dimensions, while liberals only have 2. In other words, they can't relate to conservative or right-wing statements, they can't even understand them. The moral foundations theory was presented by Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Righteous Mind. He showed that the moral conditions of politics are naturally evolutionary. This means that liberal attitudes also have an evolutionary benefit, even if we may find this difficult to imagine. If you want to get a very detailed summary of the main arguments from The Righteous Mind and understand what evolutionary function both conservative and liberal views have, you can do so at legion.com. There you will find a short version of the most important core arguments from the book. In addition to The Righteous Mind, there are also shorts on many other base titles. You won't find most of them on other platforms. You can easily listen to titles in under 25 minutes. This means you can absorb knowledge of a whole book in under half an hour every day. So try it now. Go to legion.com now and sign up with my promo code TJH to get 10% off. Are you ready for the future of the West?